waste in the United States is staggering. I'm with Tom Wright, Sustainability Project Manager for Whole Foods Market, to explore some of the issues revolving around food waste and to talk about some of the solutions. Tom, why are we wasting so much food here in the United States?
That's a big question. From the simple point of the economics of it, why we can quote afford to waste so much food, it might be another way to frame it. We treat food very cheaply. We treat food as if it is cheap. And we do it through various subsidies, real and effective subsidies. We subsidize fossil fuels, we subsidize monoculture. And so the pricing of food in the United States is probably, 20% cheaper than it should be if it was true costed. So that's one issue, is just valuing it more. Another issue is just the way we go to market. That in the United States, everything is based on abundance. It appears so, that abundance is a big deal. And so you have to have everything ready to consume on time. And that creates, that's a big expectation, to make sure your burger is there all the time, every day. And when in a sense, no store, no restaurant wants to run out of stock. Restaurants are probably more likely to be excused for that, but grocery stores just aren't excused for that. So that expectation also creates excess inventory, probably a higher level of inventory that's necessary.
Why is food waste such a problem in regards to environmental issues?
Well, if you just consider, if we're wasting, let's use the number 40%, if we're wasting 40%, that means all the ingredients, if you want, the inputs into getting that food to market are also being wasted. So that's wasted acreage, wasted water on the acreage, wasted labor on the acreage, wasted labor all the way down to through the wasting part of the food chain. There's obviously fuel wasted, space wasted, time wasted. The Japanese use a word called muda. In English, we spell it M-U-D-A, and it's the idea of any sort of waste is not good. And there's a lot of muda in the food business in the United States.
I know that we've all heard about global warming and methane. You mentioned food waste that's in a landfill releases an absorbent amount of methane gas. What does that do to
CH4, which is methane, is 21 times more powerful than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So in other words, it traps more heat than CO2 does. So methane release is a greenhouse gas, and it's an issue. And so there's a lot of movement to get organics out of landfill. And by that word organics, by the way, that means any sort of green cell based stuff. It's not the same word organics when you think of Whole Foods Market as a certified organic grocer. That's a different use of the word organic.
It's great to understand the problem, because from there we can work on some solutions. You mentioned some retailers are actually being really proactive about diverting food waste. Why don't you go inside and show us some of the areas where food waste can be diverted and where some issues are being solved? We are in this beautiful produce section of this grocery store. But produce is primarily one of the largest contributors to food waste. Why is that?
First of all, it's perishable. Second of all, if you're in a high quality market, the aesthetic is part of what the consumer experience is when they come into the store. And obviously, if you're keeping things aesthetically high, you're going to have more scraps than if you're not. This may be the easiest fruit to describe that is with bananas. If a banana is yellow with a few sugar spots, you're ready to purchase it. If a banana is too green, you're not going to purchase it. If a banana is all sugar spots, you're not going to purchase it. So there's this little window of opportunity where it actually has a retail sell value. And so it's tough on both sides of that to make sure you have it ready. Part of what the thinking is if you have high quality produce, the next best thing after you cull is the action that a produce department takes early in the morning before the customers are there, in which they cull out the stuff whose perishability is obvious, is to move that cull to the deli or the prepared foods department of the store. And so that department gets the coal, and that coal can be used for salads, for stews, for soups. That's a good way to make sure it doesn't become waste.
So in terms of best practice for a retailer within the produce section to make sure these items aren't ending up in a landfill is to practice culling and also make sure they get over to
there's got to be
prepared foods.
there's got to be a next life for the coal. The coal is still relatively good produce. It's probably I mean, to use a term that I just made up, it's lost its aesthetic value, but it's still good food nutritionally, and so it can be used somewhere. So you have a partner. Now some grocery stores have that in the store. But having said that, the partner could be somebody else. It doesn't have to be the store.
What about donating?
Donating is, of course, a very intelligent system to have in place. There's a couple things. Again, if you're dealing with perishables, things that are either perishable in the real sense that they lose their ripeness or lose their flavor, or if they're code dated with a date, a best buy date, those things are best gotten to a food bank that has refrigerated trucks. So refrigerated trucks are really important in that kind of a system because there's far more food scraps that are perishables than non-perishable food scraps. In other words, potatoes are less likely to become food scraps because they aren't so perishable. Does that make sense?
From a retailer's perspective, do you have any advice on looking for donation programs? I mean, obviously, if they have an in-house deli program, we could be talking about that, but the first step would be to donate it.
Yes, I mean, if you can donate it, first of all, you have to have rules so that the who comes to the store to pick up the donation comes at a time in which everybody expects them to come. I generally advise people to do it early in the morning. It doesn't have to be, for instance, baked goods that are baked early one morning, they could be picked up at 10 o'clock that night and served as breakfast food for the food shelter the next morning. That's smart too. But generally speaking, you want people to come early in the morning, 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and distribute their food to their food bank.
Do you think as consumers we will ever get past the aesthetic issue? I mean, we have to in part take responsibility because we like to look at a beautiful produce section.
Well, that's a great question. Let's put it this way. Retailers have tried it both ways, and the retailers that have an aesthetic orientation get a higher value from the customers. So it's like a positive reinforcing food feedback loop that way.
Tom, as you can see, all this produce is absolutely beautiful. I know it would be such a shame for it to end up in a landfill. How do we maybe think about produce as not waste and re-initiate how we're even thinking about food?
It's a great question. We do need to reconceptualize what we call waste and make it almost obsolete, the fact that we call it waste. The example comes out of the book Cradle to Cradle, and that book points it out that in ecology there is no such thing as waste. What appears as waste is food for something else. In other words, it's a nutrient. So part of teaching about this concept would be to eliminate the concept of waste in itself and to just think in terms of nutrient cycles. So this is a biological nutrient, and it's obviously good for us to eat. It's good for an animal to eat. It's good for worms to eat, some of it, and it's good for the soil to decompose in the soil. So all those outlets make it create a nutrient cycle, and that's what we prefer everybody think of it as part of a nutrient cycle.
So produce could be used for a composting cycle as a nutrient, but why is it a negative in a landfill, rotting?
Well, the word rotting is not always a good word, but in the sense of the methane release, that's the worst aspect of the food rotting. Also, it's the lost value of the nutrient cycle. You lose the nutrient cycle when you entomb it, and then you create the methane, which is a greenhouse gas, and so that cycle is a large cycle, and it's not good for humans, that cycle. It is a cycle still, by the way, it's just millennia.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting to look at how beautiful the produce is, think about it as a nutrient, and then maybe you would be disposing of it differently.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
even a residential home consumer can compost.
Correct. Yeah, home composting is increasing. It's getting to be better and better. I've been home composting for 20 years now, people comment on my tomatoes and things like that, and I just have a subtle smile and say it's because of what I'm feeding them, and they like it. It's pretty obvious.
That's wonderful. So the bakery is another large generator of potential food waste. Why is that?
It's a perishable. They scrap. They have dough as scrap. They don't always create the right amount of dough for every single thing they're baking. This store has an in-house bakery, so they have dough scrap. And of course bread it is only fresh basically for 24 to 48 hours. And so that also becomes donatable after the first day.
What are some creative ways that a store can be thinking about utilizing their scraps in the bakery as opposed to ending up in a landfill?
Well, it's okay. There's obviously around Thanksgiving, it's easy to take bread and make stuffing. But there is uses, again, a deli or prepared foods can use some bread scraps for ingredients in some food and that they offer. So that's a good outlet for that. It's better to get some value out of the scrap than no value out of the scrap. But the basic thing is, it's a famous phrase, day-old bread. And so this store has a particular rescue shelter pickup at 10 a.m. every day. Their day-old bread from the day before.
Oh, that's great. You mentioned the Good Samaritan rule.
Yeah, the Good Samaritan rule is kind of a simple rule of thumb. It's a federal rule, and it means that you can donate, if you were going to sell something, up to the day that you were going to sell it, you can donate it, and it can be used for human consumption. It's up to the receiving entity to get it to the humans before it's quote-unquote unsafe. It's called a Good Samaritan rule because it takes the liability off the store or the restaurant. And by I mean, so today is a Monday. So if the date was that it was to be sold by today, today's the last day that you could give it to a food bank or a rescue house. Now, most stores have a pull date. Anything that's dated, if it's a dairy item, then the pull date usually is 2 days before the code runs out. So in other words, today, if it had today's date on it, it was pulled on Saturday. Okay, and so that's to give them time to get it out to somebody that can use it.
So basically, when we're talking about the bakery section of a grocery store, almost nothing needs to be thrown away.
Correct. There's no reason for that attitude at all. We want everybody to realize that baked goods are something that are very easy to donate, and they're very easy to use internally. Now, how many things you can use stale bread for in a recipe outside of the Thanksgiving season it's not normal. Thanksgiving season, there's an irony in that there's very little bread donated because internally they can use all the bread they can for stuffing.
We are in the prepared food section and hot bar of the store, and this is just a great example of how a retailer can be as creative as they can think of on ways to make sure these scraps are being used as nutrients.
Yes, there's a quinoa salad here behind us, and there's carrots, tomatoes, spinach, and mango in the quinoa salad, all from the morning's cold.
And what about the hot bar?
The hot bar, there's many things. Basically, if you see something cut up, that it has a possibility that it came from the coal.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just incredible, great, still food that we can eat.
Yes.
Fantastic. Tom, we just explored and discussed ways retailers can really be creative about using their scraps and actually not needing to even recycle products because they're donating and, again, reusing. But if you are to need a recycling program for food waste diversion, in your opinion, what is best in class?
There's a couple of main ways you have to think about once you've gone through the system of right-sizing your purchasing through culling and using it internally. Then you donate to humans, and then you donate to animals for pickup. Then there's one of the other things that some produce departments still have a lot of is wax corrugated, wax cardboard boxes. Some industrial scale composters do take wax cardboard boxes. And if that's true, then that creates a natural system to use the wax cardboard boxes as the containers to put the food excess and scraps that are left over in the process as a compost pallet building device using the boxes themselves. So this particular store we're at does build compost pallets, and those compost pallets do go back to their distribution center, and then from the distribution center they go to the compost heap.
What are the recycling options for food waste?
Well, at the end of the story, a lot of the variable has to do with whether you have a lot of wax cardboard to compost or not. If you're at a store that doesn't have a lot of wax cardboard to compost, then it's best to try to negotiate using that food scrap for animal feed. But if you have a lot of wax cardboard, and wax cardboard is only compostable as an outlet, and this wax cardboard is not a good thing to recycle because of the petroleum wax in it. So it depends on the compost systems, but there are large compost systems that can shred the wax corrugated. The store that we're in, the wax cardboard is approximately 20% of the weight of what's left over.
Do you see a trend for food waste generators to potentially not be on a recycling program or a composting program because they will find efficient and effective ways within donations and culling?
Well, I mean, again, there are stores in the chain that have hog farmers as partners. So in a sense, the hog farmer comes and gets the scrap left over, and then those same stores, they take the wax cardboard, they flatten them out, put them on a pallet, and send the wax cardboard back to the distribution center. So, I mean, if your question is, will they be so good and so efficient that they have no scraps left over, that's probably not very realistic. That'd be very tough to do. That's why we teach right sizing, purchasing. We don't. The metaphor that I use is they don't know how many mangoes they're going to sell today, based on how many mangoes they sold last year. That's not really fair to think that way. Mangoes could have been better last year, could have been better this year. They could have more competitors that have mangoes this year, didn't have them last year. Mangoes could be a food trend this year or last year. So there's not too many variables to expect. So at best what you can do is just create a feedback system so that they measure things that they are scrapping and do the best they can to tighten that up. So that's what we're trying to create, is just the feedback so they understand that they, for the 6th day in a row, wasted a case of mangoes.
So Tom, in essence, to kind of wrap it up, food waste is going to be an issue, but the size of it is manageable.
Yes, it is. That really is what it gets down to, is that you have to make it manageable, and you have to be thoughtful and understand that you can not waste as much as you used to and get better at it every year. There'll be a point where it's called point of diminishing returns, famous language from economics, where you don't seem like you're improving much anymore, but that's years down the pike. This one chain we've been working with 12 years. I would say is easily into the 5th or 6th year that they kept having significant improvements before it finally started to be looking marginal. So it's just one of those things that you have to keep training and keep teaching. And that's the other point, is that it isn't rocket science, but at the same time, most people in our culture, I think, have the habit of throwing away, and so they don't think of it as a nutrient cycle. So you have to train that, you have to teach that.
Well, thank you for teaching us today.
Sure.
It's been a very insightful visit here at Whole Foods, and I see you're doing an incredible job here.
Well,
thank you
you
for showcasing the best in class.
Okay, take care.